Hi, this is Dave. Today I'd like to dig into a question that is, I think, in every Christian business person's mind and heart somewhere. It's the issue of stewardship versus shepherding. In other words, which takes priority in your organization and in your mind and in your heart? Is it the success of the organization, or is it the welfare of the people within it? It's oft that conflict is often voiced as shepherding versus stewardship. Well, it's a common predicament. I think every professional and every business executive will regularly confront situations in which they'll need to sort it out. Which is more important, the need to build the organization on one hand and the responsibility for the well-being of all the employees on the other? There's often a tension between these two sides. Now, it rarely manifests in such heady terms. Typically, it takes the form of a decision about terminating an employee. Should you bend over backwards to try to salvage this employee, even at the expense of an unduly large investment of time and money? Or do you make a quick decision to wipe the slate clean, even if it means that employee will be left with no income and a questionable entry on his or her resume? What do you do? Now, there can be some wisdom to be gained by digging into the biblical concepts of stewardship and shepherding. But the question is, how do you manage the tension between your stewardship responsibilities for the organization and your shepherding responsibilities for the individuals within it? So here's an example of how this manifests in real life. I run two what we call CBIGs, CBIG. That stands for Christian Business Impact Groups. These are peer groups of Christian business people who come together to help one another learn and help each other. And so one of the members of one of my peer groups, one of my CBIG groups, brought this story. Here was his story. His company dealt with hazardous materials. He was a coder of parts. And of course, all that stuff is very caustic and hazardous and so on. And so they had evolved a stringent anti-substance abuse policy. Here's what it was. Employees were randomly tested on a regular basis. And if they tested positive for any substance, then they were given a warning and provided counseling. If they tested positive a second time, they were automatically terminated. Okay? Now, one of his employees had just tested positive for the second time. Now, that seemed to be a simple decision, right? Except it turned out to be considerably more complex. The issue was the employee in question had been with the company for 15 years, was the owner's cousin, and was suicidal. What to do? Now, it was, from my perspective, it was the classic case of the shepherding responsibility for the employee versus the stewardship responsibility for the good of the organization. So what do you do? And, in this case, it looks like it's a clear confrontation, a clear conflict. Well, our group talked it over, and eventually we arrived at a recommendation that I think offers an approach to this dilemma. Here's what we recommended, and it was, by the way, this was a consensus. We recommended that he first fire the employee for the good of the business. And, you can't have someone under the influence of drugs handling hazardous materials. And you have a company policy. You have to stick to the policy. And of course it sends an example to other employees. So his responsibility to the organization and all the people within it demanded that he terminate this employee. So we recommended that, but we put some caveats. We recommended that the process of terminating the employee be done as well as it could be done, with respect to the dignity of the individual, making that a significant part of the process. So that's step one. Step two, now comes the shepherding piece. We recommended that the owner make a date to take the ex-employee to lunch, and at that lunch, offer to help him in any way that he could. And that action represented at least a partial fulfillment of the owner's shepherding responsibility for the individual. Now, under the circumstances, it was a resolution that combined the shepherding responsibility with the stewardship obligation. The solution was not characterized by either or, it was resolved by and. In this case, instead of asking which is more important, stewardship or shepherding, the question was, how can I do both? Changing the question led to the solution of the conflict. Here's another one. Again, these issues pop up in all sorts of very specific and practical ways. One of my clients, again, had a company, a couple hundred people, and whenever they have to terminate someone for, whatever the reasons are, they terminate them and then say, now your job is to find another job, and you can come in, you can use this office here, and we will pay you your wages until you find another job. But you have to come in every day and work at finding a job. You're not employed in the company anymore, but we're going to take care of you until you find another job. Again, the question was, how can I do both? Take care of the organization and shepherd the individuals. Here's one more example, and I think the lesson here comes up from the examples, comes from the specific to the general. So here's another one. Again, one of my CBIG members had a software company which employed programmers who worked from their homes. One particular programmer was consistently not measuring up. And after several warnings and unsatisfactory performance improvement plans, my client, my CBIG guy, made the decision to terminate the programmer. Okay. So, as a steward responsible for the well-being of the organization, my client understood that his small company could not afford the economic burden of an unproductive employee. But what about the shepherding responsibility for the well-being of that employee? Thinking in terms of both stewardship and shepherding, he drove the 3 hours to the programmer's house, brought the news in as gentle and dignified way as he could, and he extended the severance pay way beyond the company's previous practice. So when he asked the question, how can I be true to my stewardship responsibilities and my shepherding responsibilities, the and brought about a different solution. So with the resolutions in each of the incidents I just spoke about, the resolutions may not have been perfect, but they illustrate real people dealing with real issues and attempting to stay true to the concept of both stewardship and shepherding. So, moral of the story is when you're faced with one of those decisions that look like it's stewardship or shepherding, take a deep breath, recast the question, and see if the solution doesn't come from the question, how can I take care of the stewardship responsibilities and my shepherding responsibilities. And instead of or can make all the difference. Okay, hey, now before we go, just again, a little bit of encouragement to check out the XI community. XI stands for Excellence and Influence. It is a one-stop shop for content like this and connections with other Christian business people who are interested in the same thing, have the same mindset that you do, and would love to interact with you. The XI community, it's all $5 a month, and you get bunches of stuff like this. So I'll put a link in the show notes. Please check it out, the XI community. Okay, that's it. We're done. Bye-bye.